Hello, loves. Today I have compiled quite a few good stories. Let's get started. Story Night Walker. As the day comes to an end on Spring High School, two boys, John and Paul, were exiting the front gate. The boys were heading to John's house to hang out, have fun, and play video games to celebrate the final day of school. As the night went on, the boys had more and more fun, happy that summer vacation starts the next day. As the final light gets snuffed out by the dark of the night sky, putting an end to the day, the boys tell each other ghost stories. One of the stories catches Paul's attention, cause the story John told was about a dark 6.9 red eyes, white teeth man. Paul stared at John with a terrifying look on his face. John notices the color running out of Paul's face. John reaches over to shake Paul to see if he was all right. John shook Paul 3 times to snap him out of it. Paul raised his head and asked John in a terrifying, fearful voice, "Where did you hear that story from?" Paul and John became friends over this past year, so they don't know that much about each other's past. When John told the story, terrifying and violent memories, John looked surprised, and with a confused look he replied, "One of my old friends told me and found it off the internet." "Why? Look like you seen a ghost." Paul thought to himself the ghost would have been more fun to miss with him, but no. Paul looked at John and told him everything. How the story his old friend told wasn't just a story but real. Paul continues by saying the last person that hears has to tell it to another person by midnight. John looks at Paul with concern and with a little fear in his voice. What happens to the person who heard it last but can't tell the story after midnight? Paul raises his head with a serious, frightening look. Paul said, "Goes missing and appears as a corpse." The room was dead silent, not a word was said. You can even hear the mosquitoes tapping on the window, tap tap tap. Then a loud alarm from John's cell phone ripped through the silence. John grabs his phone to shut off his alarm. John takes a second look at his phone, and he notices the time. John looks up at Paul with a dreadful look. Paul stared into John's eyes, then turns the phone around, presenting Paul the time on his phone. The time read 11:15 p.m. Paul's eyes widened when he saw the time. Paul grabs his belongings to run out of John's house, but John stops him and yells out, "What now?" Paul replied, "There is something I left out. If I make it home before midnight on my own, I see another day." John looked confused and spit out, "Explain." But the short version, Paul replied, "If the last person that heard the story can't find another to tell it to anyone, the only safe place is that person's home." John looked at Paul and yelled, "Well, what are you waiting for? Go, get out, go home." Paul grabbed all of his belongings and ran out of John's house. I ran down the street as fast as my legs could take me. I felt the exhaustion kicking in and collapsed to my knees as my hands slapped the ground. I took out my phone and glanced at the time, 15 minutes till midnight. I don't have enough time to make it home. What do I do? I raise my head to see there's a park on my left-hand side. I tried to avoid all parks in fear as I stood at the entrance looking at the park. It barely has any lights working. In the darkness, it looks like a dark figure standing along the way. I have no choice but to cross. As I'm crossing, I hit the middle of the park, the most creepiest area where I stand. In the middle of the park, the silence surrounds me. Not even the breeze of the wind made a noise. As I'm standing in the middle of the park, the surrounding silence was hypnotizing. It felt time was standing still, then a roaring sound shattered the silence. My phone's alarm went off, breaking the trance that the darkness and silence had on me. I ripped my phone out of my pocket to check the time. My eyes widened. It was past midnight. The thoughts flooding through my mind, "Oh shit, gotta get home, gotta get the fuck out of the darkness." As I was about to put my body into motion, I saw in the corner of my eye a shadow figure materialize. I turned my head, and the figure took the shape and transformed into an old man. The fear ran down my face with the thoughts of where did he come from, how come I didn't hear his footsteps, and why is he waving at me? Fuck no. I took off running in the opposite direction, heading towards the nearest exit. Running through the darkness, seeing barely any lights, approaching the exit that leads out into the street. Passing through the gate of the park, running out onto the street, not paying attention, smacking into a parked car. Picking myself up off the ground, thinking I got away. I think I'm going to make it. I raise my head and down the street the old man I saw in the park waving standing at the end of the street. My eyes filled with terror, my body told me to run. I ran back into the park thinking if I run through the park cutting him off and go passing him, I can make it home. Passing through the middle of the park again, heading towards another exit, hope and thinking that this has to work. Ran back onto the street using the second exit of the park. Full sprint in motion, I ran out of the park onto the street, not stopping, heading down the street. Passing where the old man was equally standing in the street on the other side of the park. With the continuing motion, my body is on autopilot, running down the street thinking I'm clever, I lost him, but I was dead wrong. Every turn I made, the old man appeared even more creepier, sinister, threatening, terrifying. Every time I come face to face with the old man, he became more monsterized and his eyes turn a bright red. Then the old man, now the monster, started chasing after me. My body was in flight mode. I took off running, my energy, my strength, and my body depleted as well. It was falling apart. But the fear of death was plaguing my mind. Only one thought ran through my mind: I have to survive, I'm going to live. In the long distance I can see my house. I thought I'm going to make it, but there weren't any lights on. A thought enter: my parents weren't home. I'm running up the stairs, throwing my bag in front of me, digging for my house keys to unlock the front door. I stuck my keys to unlock the door. I violently ripped open the front door, falling inside. The monster was chasing me before the monster realized that I fell into my house. I kicked the door shut, slamming it into the monster's face. Safe inside my house, I ran to my door, hitting all the locks on the door. Walking through the house, not a soul in sight. I walked up the stairs to enter the bathroom to turn on the shower. As the water was heating up, I left to enter my bedroom. As I entered my room, I hit the switch to turn on the lights, but nothing happened. I raised my head to look at the light fixture. As I'm staring at the light fixture, I heard my door slowly creaking, moving, then heavy breathing piercing the darkness. I slowly turn to see where it's coming from, two red eyes floating in the darkness. The monster approaches, staring down at me face to face. It raises its arm, then it grabs me by my throat. I'm trying to fight it, but all my strength and stamina bled dry. It was getting harder to breathe, feeling my body shutting down. My sight was getting blurry, and right before the darkness covered my eyes, glanced over at my clock. I saw in blue numbers the time. At 1:10 a.m. I heard a roar from the monster. The morning sun breaks through the glass window of Paul's bedroom. The only sound echoing through the house was running water. The shower that ran on all through the night echoing. In Paul's room, his phone went off, screaming where he dropped it. The phone rang and rang every time it stopped. The calls automatically went to voicemail. On the caller ID was John trying to get in touch. John kept calling, hoping that Paul would pick up. John kept calling and calling. Eventually Paul's phone went dead. John stared at his phone, a worried look ran across his face. Story: Pizza Delivery Ghost Horror Story. Norm, California, June 2024. I live and work in Silicon Valley. The San Francisco Bay Area is one of the cheapest places to live in the United States. That's why I work for a tech company during the day but deliver pizza at night. Until recently. After that experience, I'm now looking for a less intimidating side hustle. The night is hot and the pizzas fly quickly and noisily. I just got back from delivering 5 pizzas and it's already past 10:30. I was about to get to work when the Lord pulled me aside and said that we finally had one order left. She asked if I could receive it because the other delivery person had already gone home. She told me there would be a tip, and since I was more needy than tired, I agreed. There is only one thing worth noting. The house where I delivered was in a blighted area of East Palo Alto. If you don't know anything about the area, East Palo Alto is generally pretty sketchy. But since I needed the money, I endured it and got back in the car to go buy pizza one last time. The house I delivered to was at the end of a street with many cars. The only light in sight was out. Most of the houses on the street had front porch lights on, but not a single light was on at the house where I delivered. When I stopped the car, I looked out the windshield and double-checked that I had the correct address. This place seems abandoned. What's more, it looks like a haunted house, with upstairs front windows that look like eyes and a front door that resembles a closed mouth before it opens and eats you alive. The yard was overgrown with weeds, and there was a large tree that obscured the house. I almost said, "To hell with this," and drove away. Almost like that. But after taking a few deep breaths and regaining my composure, I dropped the pizza box, got out of the car and headed towards the house. I almost dropped it when my foot touched a cracked piece of the label, and I practically had to duck under a long branch to get to the front door. Can't find the bell, so I'm entering 3 times and waiting. I expected a flash before it came on, or some light in the house to come on, but it was still dark. I waited about a minute before entering again, this time harder. Van has nothing. I was about to turn around and leave when I heard a noise on the other side of the door. It sounded like someone was trying to find a window that couldn't be found. I thought maybe they were afraid to open the door or something, so I raised my voice and said, "Pizza delivery." I heard something that sounded like a voice, but couldn't understand what the person was saying. Then I heard someone fiddling with the lock on the other side of the door. I took a step back and waited as I pressed the start button and the door slowly opened. At first, I couldn't determine anything about the reopening person, regardless. He was an older man, perhaps 60 or 70 years old, with velvety hair and thick glasses. There was nothing unusual about him, nothing that suggested he was anything but what he seemed. However, when I looked at him, I had an uneasy feeling. I picked up the pizza box and told him I had received his order. He looked at it like it was something small that he wasn't expecting. He didn't say a word but just nodded and turned around as if he was going to get his wallet. The door closed softly and he disappeared from my sight. I waited and waited, but he didn't come back. I listened and heard nothing. I realized I hadn't heard him walk and thought maybe he was just behind the door or something. As I get richer and richer, I try to take my head out to look inside. I saw something outside in the darkness, so I decided to take gentle measures inside. I said, "Hello." But there is no answer in noise. In the end, I lost the fight so much that I opened the door and called again. I found a completely empty front apartment, without even any furniture. It was completely dark, and I couldn't see any further. I listened for another minute before a sudden feeling of fear entered me, and I slowly backed away. The house is completely empty. No noise was found. I finally had enough and turned around, almost hitting my head on a low tree branch, and almost ran to my car. I didn't look back once to see if there was any activity in the house, and I threw the pizza on the passenger seat and got the hell out of there, not sure exactly why I was so scared, but just in case. Top of your abilities. I was angry when I brought the pizza back to the restaurant. She asked me why I didn't call the number on the order to see if I was calling the wrong house, and I admitted that I hadn't even thought of that. That's my speed. She went to the phone to autodial, then put the phone down with a confused look. "It no longer works," she said. I was still worried about getting home and couldn't sleep, so I decided to look up the address online. First, my house arrived. I then looked up the address online along with the name on the order. What I found scared me to the point of exhaustion, and I called La Pizza the next day and quit my job. Turns out, the house had been abandoned for many years. The last resident of the house was a man who was questioned on suspicion that many children went missing in the area in the 80s. The article went on to say that the man committed suicide at his home. Not long after verified and resolved, let's say monitoring the alert was done, and this is how the penalty was avoided. Although police never found any evidence in the house of the crimes he was suspected of, it was almost universally assumed that he had kidnapped and killed children in the area, and that there were perhaps even more than that. I can't find any pictures of that man online, but something tells me that if there were, I would see a face like the one I found at the door of that house. I believe that what I saw was a ghost, and although the man I saw may have escaped it, he was clearly not in a state of rest. I just hope his victims still rest in peace and that they aren't trapped in that house with him either. Story: Psychological horror. Oh, my head hurts. Where am I? What is going on? When I look around me, is it some small subway station? Yes, it is. But what am I doing here? Why isn't there anybody? And, oh no, I'm running to it, and yes, the exit is in fact walled. I'm scared, start to punch in that wall, but surprisingly nothing happens. Okay, keep your head still, look around you. But the only thing I can see is a light bulb. Slowly drifting from one side to the other. Doing that annoying noise. But there is no wind, how can it be moving? And that noise, it's driving me crazy. No. Keep rational thinking. There is just one way I can go. No exit, two of the tracks walled as well. There are two options. Left or right. Left or right. There is black darkness in both of them. I'm scared. What do I do? I go in the left one. No, I can hear something and run headlessly back. Okay, just breathe. Now I'm going in the right one. Everything seems good so far. Couple steps, couple more with a hand on the wall. I look back and can see just the faintest light. No. I can't go back, I must keep on going forward. Breathe, one step, then another one. Good, everything is fine. Don't think about anything, just do one more step. And one more. Good. I'm falling, I've stumbled over something. No, don't look at that thing, it's not alive, and that's all you need to know. God, did I hear something? No. It's just my brain making up things that are not real. Breathe, you can do it. More steps. Good, your legs are somewhat surer now. You can keep walking. Why is my breathing starting to go faster? Why is that dark so dark? What is that? No. It's nothing. Now I heard something. It's right behind me. No, it's next to me. No. Is it in front of me? What is that? It. Yes, it's me. What am I doing? Am I screaming? It does seem like that. Yes, it was me, now you know that you can calm down. My heart rate is returning to normal. I can go on now. One step. Then another. Yes, you're doing great. Now continue. It cannot be much further away. You can do it. You can do everything after all. Think about something positive. But about what? I can't think about anything. Wait a second. Who am I? What is my name? I. I can't remember. I stop. What is going on? How did I get here? And how is it possible I don't even know my name? What was that? Oh, I heard it. It's here, right behind me. Now I'm running. Running for my life. No matter what is in front of me, the only thing that matters is what's behind me. I can't hear it over my own heavy breathing, but I know it's here. It's omnipresent. It's my demon. I'm trying to get away from it, but it's still closer and closer. I can sense it. I'm running faster than anybody else has ever run, I'm flying. But that thing is still behind me. I just know it. If I stop, I die. That's the rule. I know them as well as it knows it. What's that? I see something. Is it some light? No. I must be hallucinating. Now it's gone. But I'm still running as fast as I possibly can. Yes, it is light. In front of me. Even though it is not possible, now I'm running even faster. I can see that blissful glow. I can feel it, I can smell it, I can hear it. I'm almost there. What? No. I fell. I must get up, that thing is getting closer and closer every second. But I can't. I can see that shine. But I look back and there it is. The darkness. The pure evil darkness. And the demon. Shining red eyes, hunting eyes, hungry eyes. Now it's the end. I know it, I can't fight back. I simply can't. Yes, it's moving closer. I turn my head towards that glow, towards heaven, but deep down I know what's coming for me. Hell, nothing more, nothing less. The hell. I wake up, screaming. What was that? It was so real. I can still see it all, I can still hear it all, I can still feel it all, I can still smell it all. It's here with me as well. I know it. It was a dream. But it was also a reality. I stand up and go open that window. I need fresh air. I need some fresh air to get myself together. Okay, it was nothing. I'm good. Yes, now with the air floating around me I feel just fine. And now what? Should I go back to sleep? Yes, I should, just a couple more seconds in this chill fresh air. In this fresh air. And now, what? Back to sleep. Yes. I make that step. But what? It is not towards the bed. I want to go to bed. Another step. Wait a second. Where am I going? Why am I climbing in the window? What? And now another step. And nothing else, there is nowhere to make another step. There will be no more steps for me anymore. No more of anything. Goodbye, world. Demon. I might see you again. I might see you very soon. Story, Pumpkin Boots Original Horror Story. Branches swayed as a light chill engulfed. No one was visible to the eye, but you could hear people faintly. It was Halloween night, and most were out having fun, except for 24-year-old Sarah Linnick. She sat within the confines of the bus stop shelter, which resided on a short rural road. She had just finished her 8-hour shift at the local petrol station, a mile's walk from the bus stop. Sarah's brunette hair flickered gently, her left foot tapped repeatedly. The bus was 5 minutes late. She glanced down at her phone, 9:05 p.m. She sighed, rolling her big brown eyes. This was the third time this had happened within the week. All she had to keep her company was the orange leaves that scattered the ground, and the pub that resided half a mile away. The whistling air brought her just a smidge of comfort. Sarah turned her head left to see a car driving in her direction. It beeped its horn and gradually slowed down. The driver's window lowered. "Hey, fancy a lift, love," the girl shouted as she and her friend in the passenger seat giggled. The driver was dressed as a nurse, and her friend a slutty clown. It was pretty clear both were under the influence of something. Alcohol? Drugs? Both? It was hard to tell. "Oh, never mind then," the driver laughed as she slammed her foot on the accelerator. Not even so much as giving Sarah a chance to respond. The fumes from the car cornered her in the bus shelter. "Idiots," Sarah said under her breath. A part of her envied girls like that. She so wished she could be as carefree as them, but it just wasn't in her nature. She hated the fact that she was so sensitive, so insecure. Her negative opinion of herself had been holding her back for most of her life. Sarah was completely unaware of her attractive qualities, and what she was capable of bringing to the table. It had been a rough couple of months, breaking up with her boyfriend of 5 years, along with financial struggles and toxic family drama. Sarah's life was in a mega rut, and her head was firmly planted in the sand. Sarah's eyes closed. The environmental whispers amplified. She took a deep breath, her eyes opened upon hearing a chirp from her phone. "Happy spooks, brat. Don't be too boring tonight." The text read from a contact named Bro Denny. She replied. "Fuck you buck teeth LMAO." Sarah's ears picked up on relentless crunching. Her eyes darted right, a man approached. Silver headphones with minuscule wear and tear rested on his head. Plastic full-rimmed square glasses covered his blue eyes. He was casually good-looking. Textured navy zip-up cardigan, slim-fit black chino trousers, and a very peculiar pair of boots. They were obnoxiously orange, having a similar texture to that of pumpkin skin. A visual not so easy on the eye, however, Sarah couldn't look away. She had never seen such an unusual pair of boots. She almost respected the ballsiness to even wear them out in public. The man entered the shelter, sitting down on the bench. There was a reasonable gap between he and Sarah. She could mildly hear the song that played in his headphones. It rung a bell for her, but she couldn't quite remember what it was. The man turned to Sarah. She quickly looked away. She felt slightly uncomfortable knowing that he was now looking at her. The man then focused straight ahead, sliding the headphones down his neck. He began running his fingers thoroughly through his dark brown, Ivy League hair. "Late again, huh?" he said out loud. Sarah acknowledged his comment, turning. "Oh, never mind us, freezing our arses off." Sarah laughed. "Well, to be fair, it's not that cold, but still," he continued. Sarah half smiled while nodding her head. "Nick," he said, going for a handshake. "Sarah," she replied, awkwardly reciprocating. "So, have you been waiting long then, Sarah?" "Long enough." "I assume you're on your way home from work?" "You assumed right, Nick. I work the night shifts myself. I suppose there are worse jobs than wandering around a mostly empty warehouse." "Sounds fun," Sarah said. "It has its perks," laughed Nick. "What do you do, Sarah?" Just as she was about to answer, they were both distracted by two men wearing matching demonic skull masks, driving motorbikes. "Yeah. It's Halloween, YA cunts," yelled out one of the riders. The motorbikes then sped down the road. The men screamed at the top of their lungs as they both did wheelies. "Don't you just hate vermin like that?" said Nick. "Vermin is a bit strong, but, yeah," Sarah responded. "Grown arse men, acting like snotty teens. It's fucking embarrassing. Pathetic." Sarah couldn't have agreed more. Nick appeared somewhat flustered. "I've been dealing with people like that my whole life. They sicken me, fucking sicken me." "You shouldn't let them get to you, you know," Sarah said. "I know, but they just frustrate me so much." "Like, who do they think they are?" Nick sighed. A few seconds of silence then passed. Anyway, he said, motioning his hands. "Like I was saying, where do you work, Sarah?" "At the petrol station just up there," she pointed. "I know the place, it's seen better days." "Do you actually like working there?" It pays the bills, so, I get ya, Nick said. "I'm just gonna say this, and you can tell me to fuck right off if you want to, but I think you're too bloody pretty to be working at some petrol station." Sarah's eyes fluttered, her cheeks flushed. "Oh, shut up." "No, I'm serious, I mean, you're a sort, Sarah." Sarah shook her head, laughing. "It's true." Nick laughed back. In that moment, both made heavy eye contact. Sarah couldn't help but be captivated by this mysterious man wearing the ugliest pair of boots she had ever seen. "You're quite the charmer, Nick." "Well, when you've practiced as much as I have in the mirror, I mean, well, you become quite the pro." "Why, thank you, Sarah. I do appreciate it." Both continued to laugh at what now had become a ridiculous conversation. Then, familiar sounds returned. Faint screaming emerged from the distance. The masked men were approaching. "Here we fucking go," mumbled Nick. "Oi. Danny." "The fuckers are still here," the secondary rider said. The front motorbike reduced its speed, eventually coming to a full stop. The other did the same. The front rider wearing the black and yellow leather jacket removed his mask. His buddy in the brown body warmer opted to keep his on. You still waiting for your bus?" "Fucking hilarious." "Maze, this is too sad," laughed the man in the brown body warmer. "Fuck it, let's get to know the cunts, Danny boy," said Maze. Nick stared daggers. "What the fuck are you looking at, Specky Four Eyes?" Nick didn't budge. Maze unzipped his jacket and threw it at his motorbike. "I said, what the fuck are you looking at?" he said, shoving Nick's forehead. He then ripped the headphones from Nick's neck. He dropped them and proceeded to stomp rapidly. You like that, huh? You like that fuckface? Laughed Maze. I hope they weren't a fortune, mate. Danny approached Sarah. Well, aren't you a little fox, he said, licking his cracked lips. Fuck off, said Sarah. Danny grabbed her by the forearm, smirking as he did so. Mouthy, mouthy, he said. I'm gonna have to teach you a lesson now, slutbag. Maze watched on laughing. Go on, Danny. Show her who's king. Maze looked back at Nick. He immediately felt something sharp slice against his face. He instinctively backed away, groping his left cheek. His hand was covered in blood. Nick held a black-coated pocket knife. Beyond the lenses, his eyes displayed a look of harmful intent. Mace chose to keep up the tough guy act. Come on then, Specky, he roared. Danny rushed toward Nick. He got a knife in the stomach for his troubles. Nick yanked the knife out of the gut. The cunt stabbed me, Maze. He fucking stabbed me. Danny cried as he dropped to his knees. Sarah looked on, big-eyed. Maze moved forward with no common-sense thought. Nick pointed the knife at the oncoming. It pierced right into Maze's chubby Adam's apple. Both hands clutched his neck. He stumbled backward and collapsed onto the leaves. Nick sauntered toward him. He stood over Maze. Blood poured out between his fingers. His eyes were draining of life, and fast. Nick began penetrating the flesh of Maze. No part of him was safe. Sarah winced with each stab. She looked away, but her ears continued to absorb every sound of flesh being violated. Nick stopped upon realizing stillness had overcome Maze. He turned his attention to Danny. Please, he screamed, guarding his wounded gut. I fucking beg of you. Leave me alone. Please. Nick removed Danny's mask. He grabbed him by his shaggy, dirty blonde hair and positioned him to face Sarah. I dare you. Dare you to call her slutbag again. I fucking dare you. I'm sorry. I'm fucking sorry. Didn't quite catch that, Danny. Say it louder. Go on. Say it. Say it. I said I'm sorry. Please. Tears flowed from Sarah, she was frozen. You people make me sick. Nick whispered in Danny's ear. He released his grip. Danny fell face first at Sarah's feet. I'm sorry. Please, help. Danny muttered. Sarah let out a deafening scream as the knife plunged into his back. Nick's face was beaming. Sarah's body shivered at the sounds of Danny's cries. His vocal performance getting weaker and weaker. Now who's the cunt? Huh? Huh? Tell me, who's the fucking cunt, Danny boy, screamed Nick. The knife entered Danny's back again, and again, and again. Mercy didn't linger anywhere near here. Nick grabbed him by the hair and propped him up to face Sarah once more. The blade found its way in front of Danny's throat. It pressed itself against the skin. His eyes vibrated weakly. Please, please, said Danny in a barely passable voice, then, slice. Danny gasped, he shook, but then he collapsed once again at Sarah's feet. Nick turned his head. His eyes closed. Silence hovered over this massacre. Why can't they leave me alone? Nick whimpered as he put the bloodied knife back inside the inner pocket of his cardigan. All I want is peace. It's all I've ever wanted. Nick stared back at Sarah, teary-eyed. When will it ever end? When? I'm fucking tired. Nick wiped the tame tears away. He glanced downward. He dipped both palms into a mini blood pool. Nick entered the bus shelter and approached the frontal glass. He leisurely smeared its appearance with redness. Nick stood back, gripping both sides of his neck, and chuckled. I just have to laugh at it all. Do you know what I mean? Like, what else can I do? Sarah's bottom lip quivered. Are you okay? Sarah? Sarah couldn't look him in the eye. Her vision was firmly locked on his hideous boots. I understand, I really do, Nick said. People like you and me were just meant to suffer. It's not fucking fair. Nothing about it is fair, but that's just the way it is, I suppose. He tittered. That's just the way it is. Story, short horror story. My body is deep in a state of rest. I could not move or hear my thoughts at all because in this state I am frozen. My body is getting all the energy recharge in the world. I don't know how many hours it has been since I go into the state of silence. I know that I rest my body around nighttime, but I don't remember the time that I fall to sleep. It was probably 6 p.m., 7 p.m., or even 8 p.m. Those are the usual time that any person would choose to rest. As my eyes are closed, I can only experience the darkness around me. Honesty, I feel nothing. It is like my body is skipping time and space as I rest. Maybe sleeping is a type of time travel or any other form of manipulating space. In sleep, a person skips time by hours or even days. Sleeping is just a state of rest, but can it be used for experiments for time travel? It is unlikely because it is just a state of being frozen. As my body freezes into the darkness of time, I feel a hand touching me. I could not move or think about what could touch me. I ignore it because probably a bug. However, if my body was resting, how could I feel something touching me? Am I asleep or somehow awake, but I don't know. My eyes are still in the darkness of space and time, and my body is not seen, but still present. I try to find out what just touched me. I try to wake myself up, but my body is frozen. I couldn't move an inch at all. My eyes open. The eyes see the darkness of the room and anything around it. I think that I am awake, but still, my body is frozen in time. I couldn't move my eyes or limbs at all. I try to move, but a force is holding my body together. An invisible force that has control of time, space, and even reality. A silent entity that lurks in the darkness of the place around time and space. My heart starts to beat heavily. My body breathes a sigh of fear. I feel the touching again, but this time it is claws. It scratches my legs. I couldn't feel it, but I know that whatever is touching my legs are pulling vines from it. Luckily, I couldn't feel the pain, but it still causes my heart to beat heavily. My left and right legs show the red-soaked veins, which are cut from them. I try to look up, but my head freezes in a state of fear. My eyes look around and a figure appears. The figure stands by my head. The figure has claw-like hands. One side of its face has sharp teeth like a bear. Red liquid is on its teeth. The figure has spiders crawling out of its right arm. Its right hand has sharp teeth and red eyes. The figure looks like a girl. She looks like that she is in her late teen. The figure's body has a mouth with claws on it. Spiders, beetles, scarabs, and snakes are clawing out of her mouth. On the left side, its body looks normal. The figure has blue glowing eyes. On the left hand, it has a scare mark, which is from self-mutation. I have the look of horror on my face. The girl walks up to my arms. She pulls out her left hand and tells me to be quiet. I could not move anyway. Her claws cut into my arms. She forcibly pulls out the veins in my arms. I start to cry with the feeling of invisible pain. The girl looks at me with a smile on her face. Bugs and snakes crawl all over her eyes. She pulls out a blue and gold mask. One side of the mask is gold, while the other is blue. She puts it on my face. I try to stop her from doing it, but I could not move my body. I watch as the girl put the mask on me. I could not see what was going on. I hear the girl undressing my nightgown. I hear the cold air hits my naked body. I hear laughter around me. It sounds like a child. The sounds are all around me. I could not take it anymore. I try to force myself to wake up. I try to escape this horrible nightmare that I am experiencing. I scream with anger in my voice, "Get the fuck out of my head, you bastard," I say, but my mouth didn't move. The demand goes into my mind instead into the monster. Every time I try to fight it, an invisible force holds me. The silent force has me under its control. I keep hearing the laughter around me. I close my eyes to put an end to the nightmare. As I did close my eyes, the world around me turns into a dark place. All the darkness is around me disappears. I begin to go back to sleep. After minutes go by, I finally open my eyes. The laughter stops and at the same time, the mask is gone. I look around and my limbs are not cut. I boost up from my bed. I stand up with a look of fear on my face. I survived whatever happened to me. I feel the sweat coming from my face. I begin to cry. What was that? Sleep paralysis? A living nightmare? What the fuck, dude? I have thought that I could have died. I am glad that I didn't die. I look up at my door. As I walk up to the door, I feel something wrong. My body starts to play the beating of my heart. I start to breathe heavily. Sweat pours down my face. I feel something is behind the door. A benevolent force is behind the door waiting for me. It could have been my mind playing a trick on me. I slowly open the door. Every cracking sound the door makes I look behind and forward. My heart is racing as I open the door. When I fully open the door, I see nothing but a dark black hallway. I look with relief as I open the door. I am happy that nothing was behind the door. I walk into the hallway to the stairs and hear something behind me. Don't go outside, the voice sounds like my sister, Edlita. In her voice, she sounds worry and concern. I turn around and see her. She has a scared look on her face. Her clothes are dirty. She smells like trash. She has not taken a bath in several weeks. On her body are bumps and infectious cuts. They have not been treated in weeks. The bumps are on her arms and face. Red boils are covering her arms and the cuts on her legs. The cuts are healed due to weeks, but they are long and deep. They are still visible to see. It seems like a knife did that to her. I look at Edlita with confusion on my face. How did Edlita get all of these bumps, cuts, and boils on her skin? Why haven't Edlita got cleansed yet? I believe my mother or father would have cleansed her or noticed the infectious things on her body. I look at her and said, "Where is mommy and daddy or big sisters?" I ask with seriousness on my face. Edlita looks at me with nervousness. She starts to shake when she hears that question. She tries to avoid answering me. I look at her and repeat the question. When I repeat the question, she sits on the hallway floor. She tries to avoid it again. I don't know why she is avoiding the question, but I could sense in her heart something is wrong. All around me that area seems off. I just woke up from a dream where a monster was using me to this questionable setting. The house seems to have this feeling of weirdness. It might be my mind playing a trick on me, but how is Edlita's unclean? She wouldn't be unclean because I know my parents. They would never let Edlita be dirty or smell like trash. I know my parents, where are they? Maybe this is why Edlita is avoiding my question. Something might have happened to my parents. Edlita, please tell me what is going on. I have to know because I need to know what happens to our parents, I say with concern on my face. Edlita seems to freeze as I ask her that question. Her eyes look at me. She points at the door on the left side. It is my parents' room. By it, there is a door to my brother, Alex's room. The reason Bella does not have a room because she moved out a long time ago. I walk toward my parents' door. I stand in front of it. I knock on the door. There is no answer. I knock repeatedly. Every time I knock, there was no one waking up. They are probably in a deep sleep, I think. I look at the clock on the wall. The time says 2 p.m. It seems odd for my parents to be sleeping, as they have never slept at an early time. They would go to sleep at 9 p.m., it could be due to oversleeping, but even that it seems unlikely of them. They wake up at 5 a.m. to get Edlita ready for school. She has to be at school around 7 a.m. I knock one more time. When I did, nothing happens. I decide to do what no kid would ever do, go in their parents' bedroom without knocking. I never did that because they might be having sex or they do not want to be bother. I have to break this unwritten social rule to find the underlying cause of this unusual event. I twist the knob and open the door. As I open the door, it hits me. A force of an unpleasant smell attacks me. The smell is of rotten eggs and shit mixed together. Their room smells like the underground sewer system of Morgantown. I gag and choke on the smell. I throw up on the floor as the smell hits me. I cough the puke in my throat. I try to breathe for oxygen in my lungs. I look in the room for a quick peek. I see my parents. What I see makes me want to die and throw up again. My parents lay on the bed. Their faces show the expression of terror and horror. Their lifeless bodies are frozen in the pain of torture and suffering. It looks like a person may have enjoyed watching their pain and misery. Flies and maggots cover their bodies. They are eating the inside of their flesh. Maggots cover the eyes of my parents, eating and tearing away from their eye sockets. The flies are doing their jobs, which are producing more maggots for them to survive. I couldn't believe what I am seeing. The flies and maggots are surviving, but my parents are gone. I jump back with my heart beating. I enter my brother's room. I walk in and smell the horrific hellish scent. I look at my brother, Alex. He didn't suffer the same fate as my parents. His eyes are closed and his mouth has no expression. I didn't see that has happened to him, but I did see a pill bottle. I walk into the room. I fight off the scent to try to investigate the pill bottle. I hold my nose to breath. As I am walking into the room, I feel my eyes tearing up. Water comes down as I walk. The reaction of the smell is causing the moisture in my eyes to dry out. They feel like bricks in my eye sockets. I grab the pill bottle. I run out of the room. I yell in pain as my eyes are burning. The stone brick feeling causes my eyes to ignite in pain. I try to blink to get moisture, but it was hard. My eyelids could not automatically blink. My body is urging me to not blink because it will hurt. I hold on to the stair railings. I force my eyelids to close. As they close, the pain registers in my body. It feels like my brain explodes. My head rings like an atomic bomb explosion. I yell in pain and suffering. My eyes start to get moisture. My eyes are back to normal. My head still feels like a war site. I look at the pill bottle. The label reads cyanide. It makes sense. It could be the only pill to be able to kill a person quickly. My parents must have put the pill into Alex's mouth during sleep. Then, they must have killed themselves. It must have been murder-suicide. That does not make sense. Why would my parents murder my brother? They are not murderers. They love us. They would never do that. Why is Edlilda still alive? Why did my parents not sneak into my room and kill me? Did my sister survive the killing, or did she murder all of them? My sister would never murder her loved ones. I look at the bodies. I notice something. What I learned from a mystery movie, there has to be a killer. By the look of my parents' faces, they could not be the killers. Someone killed them. My brother, Alex, must have been killed first. The reason I believe he was killed first is due to the layout of the rooms. His room was the first door at the top of the stairs. In addition, if the killer or killers killed my parents first, he or she would alert one of my parents, thus making the killing loud, not quiet. I look at my sister and say, "Who did this? Do you remember?" As I say that, she points toward the radio and looks at it. I look at it, and I see the power button and turn it on. When I turn it on, I hear a woman voice. She is a reporter of some local news anchor. I also hear helicopters flying and gunfire. The reporter says on the radio, today's news, it has been 2 weeks since a prisoner by the name of Fred Bella escaped from prison and unleashed a deadly chemical on the city. It caused people around it to die. We don't know how to stop it, but Frebella had. Before the reporter can finish, I hear a sound of growling. Within seconds, I hear the reporter yells in the radio and it cuts off the connection. The radio went silent. I have a look of fear on my face. My grandmother did all of this. She caused all of this death and destruction. I knew it was a deadly chemical. I know it is possible to create a gas to kill millions. The Nazis did it to people whom they believed were inferior. How could one person manage to create a gas to kill off many people, especially since the person was in prison? I grabbed Edlita and carry her on my back. I walked downstairs and got in front of the door. I try to open the door, but Edlita stops me. She points toward a newspaper on the coffee table. I walk toward the coffee table and pick it up. When I pick it up, it's read deadly biochemicals causing humans to kill, free for all. The description of the paper is about how Fred Bella unleashes a deadly chemical, which causes people to become mind control and kill each other. Morgantown and Evanston were not the only towns affected by the deadly chemicals. The world is affected by the deadly chemical. The death toll was 800 million people and still counting. I drop the paper in fear. I look at Adilda with sadness on my face. I feel my heart breaking as I realize that my grandmother has completed her goal. She did more kills than Hitler, Stalin, and Zedong. How did she make the chemical weapon in prison? It could not be a reality. It is no possible way that she could have done this, especially in a couple of months. I have tears coming down my eyes. I did not want to cry. I wipe the tears from my eyes and open the door. My sadness turns into a complete loss for words. I look into the red skies and the burning hollow houses. I see death and destruction around me. I see the despair and misery of the deadly chemical on its victims. Their faces meet my worry eyes. Their empty and horrendous faces lay on the road of death with the others. This did not scare me because what I saw is beyond human understanding. People walking around the bodies, but their eyes are not alive. The smell of sulfur and fire cover the walking mindless people. They let out an animalistic growl. Their eyes are dark. They walk slow and long down the street. Reanimated corpses, I know it could be possible. I try to reanimate animals to create a mindless army with my chemical, but my grandmother managed to do that. The deadly chemical, was it mine? The experiment that I performed on dying animals, did my grandmother take my experimental ideas? It can't be possible because my grandmother was in prison. No, my experiment could not have caused all of this. My experiment was supposed to be used on guilty people, not innocents. My mother destroyed it. How could my grandmother copy my plan? The corpses look at my sister and me. They start to growl. Their hunger for flesh overcomes their slow walking, and they bolt at me. 12 corpses run toward me. They are yelling hey, hey, and hey. Me and my sister look as the walking dead bolted us. Story, The Blaze, a short horror story. The seas did speak to Walter. Yet, he didn't wish to listen to their ominous tune. An ice-cold fear of those salty waves crept up his spine, as the fog did creep across the shore. That invisible frost lent the old man some ease. It's merely the cold, he whispered, shivering, nothing more. He glanced at the brick of the lighthouse and quickly got back to work. Yet, even as he reassured himself, he made nary a glance at those heavy waves. A deep gray settled over his abode, a thick blanket of lethargy that snaked up the ivory tower of the foreboding lighthouse. Accursed thing, the keeper muttered, his voice snatched away by the waves as if starved. He spoke no louder, as if afraid to be heard by the very ocean itself. Thus, he toiled away in the midday fog, careful not to peek at those icy waves as they crashed, the heavy crests leaving foam scattered on that dreary shore. A rotten stench rose on the newfound breeze, The old man's lips trembled as he looked upon the overcast sky. A storm fast approached from the east, with it the dreaded night. A worrisome amount of gulls flew overhead, their cries of delight disconcerting as they dove into the dark depths. Something caught Walter's watchful eye as he scanned the foam cautiously. A large piece of wood emblazoned with dark lettering. His face wrought with fear, Walter rushed inside. Hours passed as he sat in silence, shivering despite a smoldering fire in front of him. He poked at it restlessly as his teeth chattered. Every creak that shattered the silence earned a quick survey of the small room he was sequestered in. A suffocating anxiety plagued Walter, made much worse by the sudden crack of lightning. He flinched and his lips turned up into a grimace as the rain began pattering on his feeble house. That awful feeling persisted, and hung in the air as the last needles of sunlight were swallowed by the gray of the clouds and sea. With a shaky breath he drummed his fingers on his wooden chair, mulling over his yet-to-be-had arduous journey. Chest rising and falling rapidly, he muttered 47 steps. The second and 37th squeak. Mustn't make a sound. He repeated his nightly mantra until the words were seared upon memory. The fear somewhat abetted by the cauterization of that chant, he stood, eyes hardened and knuckles whitening. With a gaunt face he snatched a coat and made his way out the door. Quick steps were drowned out by the immense downpour. Scurrying towards that formidable structure, he pulled the cloak tighter to shield himself from the chill. A flash of lightning illuminated the waves as Walter made haste. Barely containing a cry of fear, he sprinted as fast as his knobbly knees could carry him. Throwing open a slippery old door, he bolted inside as if the eyes of the sea were focused on the pathetic man. His heating pants broke the quiet of the room as his eyes darted around wildly scanning the dark. Not nearly satisfied that he was alone, but with little time to waste, he began his careful, tedious ascent. 47 steps. The second and 37th squeak. Complete and utter darkness wrapped around him as he tentatively touched his gnarled old boot on the first step. 1, he said so inaudibly it perhaps didn't actually make a sound, but it thundered through Walter's mind, a roaring crackle. He reached his foot over the second and touched the third. 3. This continued for some time until the last blessed step came. Despite the chill in the air, the grizzled old man was covered in a sheen of salty moisture. He was unsure if it was sweat or tears. At last he stood before a simple wooden door. Yet, the man's terror had his heart in a firm embrace. He knew what agony awaited. Eyes glazed with fear, pupils dilated so that the earthy brown was swallowed whole by inky blackness. Walter slowly raised a shaky hand, pushing open the door. Pale tapestries of moonlight danced around him, reflecting off the glass of the lighthouse. An eerie silence descended, prevailing over the relentless storm. Fumbling in his trousers, he pulled a matchbook free. Hands quivering, he held them with a terrible fear. As if striking them were an evil deed. Holding one aloft, he brought it down with a whimper. A sharp hiss followed as a ghostly orange light barely held down the pressure of the dark. "Please," he said with trembling lips, his voice barely penetrating the quiet. He threw the match in the oil. It twirled in the air, small circles of light glinting over every surface. Not a moment later the match's flame touched the oil. A great fire erupted as he leapt towards the floor, glancing towards that obsidian tide, revealed only by that hellfire. Hundreds of ghastly faces stared back from beneath the waves, welcoming him to their cold embrace. They seemed to dance in the tide, unaffected by their shredded bodies. "No," he shrieked in fright, trembling as the corpses called. "Please. Forgive me," he wailed as he doused the fire and curled up on the floor, whimpering pitifully. He lay there shaking and sobbing in shame. The storm could not drown out the brutal screams and crashes as the starving sea pulled more unlucky to their domain. Story: The Forgotten Shadows. Open with eerie, unsettling music and a dark, gloomy background of an old, abandoned house. Introduce the protagonist, Emily, a curious urban explorer with a passion for uncovering hidden histories. Emily hears rumors about the old Rayburn house on the outskirts of town. The locals say it's haunted, but Emily doesn't believe in ghosts. She decides to explore the house, hoping to find some interesting artifacts or hidden stories. Emily approaches the house at dusk, capturing the decaying exterior with her camera. As she steps inside, the door creaks loudly, and a chill runs down her spine. The air is thick with dust, and the floorboards groan under her weight. While exploring the main hall, Emily finds an old, dusty photo album. She flips through the pages, seeing pictures of a happy family. Suddenly, she hears footsteps behind her. She turns around, but no one is there. Her heartbeat quickens, but she dismisses it as her imagination. Emily ventures deeper into the house. She hears whispers echoing through the halls and sees shadows moving in her peripheral vision. She tries to rationalize these occurrences, but feels an increasing sense of dread. She finds a door leading to the basement. Despite her fear, curiosity drives her to descend the creaky stairs. The basement is dark and damp, filled with old furniture and broken toys. She feels a cold breath on her neck and turns around to see a ghostly figure of a little girl staring at her. The ghostly girl points to an old trunk in the corner. Emily opens it to find newspaper clippings about the Rayburn family. They reveal a tragic story of a fire that killed the entire family, except for the little girl who went missing and was never found. Emily realizes that the ghost is the missing girl, seeking closure. Emily tries to leave the basement, but the door slams shut. The whispers grow louder, and the shadows close in on her. She understands that the spirits of the house are not malevolent, they are trapped, reliving their tragic fate. She promises to help them find peace. With the ghostly girl's help, Emily finds a hidden diary in the trunk. The diary details the family's final moments and the girl's escape plan that failed. Emily takes the diary and manages to open the basement door. As she exits the house, the spirits seem to fade, finally at peace. Emily leaves the Rayburn house, vowing to tell the world their story. She publishes her findings, and the house becomes a memorial for the Rayburn family. The video ends with Emily looking back at the house, now at peace, and a message about the importance of remembering and honoring the past. Story: The Void in Purity. I sat in the waiting room, bored out of my mind. The magazine I was reading had lost my interest. "Emily Thompson, you're up," the doctor said, stepping into the waiting room. A lady stood up and followed the doctor to another room. When I entered the hospital, she was the only other person in the waiting room, so I knew I was next up. I looked up at the TV, still on the news. Since I had arrived, it was just boring celebrity news, nothing important. But now it was showing interesting things. Serial killer caught in France, found guilty of 8 acts of murder. It showed his mugshot, with a dark shade of gray next to it. "That's his blood purity?" said the man sitting next to me. "Jesus, that's really dark. That's what killing 8 people does to you," I said. It felt like me and the man were about to start a long conversation, but before it could get any further, "Jake Anderson," the doctor said, peeking into the waiting room. I stood up and walked with the doctor. After only a few minutes, the blood donation was ready to begin. I looked over at the bag filling with my blood, and the doctor seemed impressed. "Your blood is very pure," he said. "You must be a very good person." "Well, thank you," I said, "but isn't this a normal purity?" The doctor looked at the bag again. The blood was almost completely white, with only a tiny bit of darkness. "Every single sin you commit makes your blood a little less pure," he said. "It's incredibly impressive to have blood this pure in your 30s. After only a few more minutes, I left the hospital. I checked my phone to see a message from my wife. "Tell me when you're on your way back, so I know when to start on dinner," she said. Of course, I responded, telling her I was going home now. I reminisced about our first date. I still vividly remembered her dark hair and crimson-red dress. Soon later, I arrived home. As I walked through the door, I was hit by a delicious smell. But it was also very noisy. My 2 kids were running around and causing chaos. My wife was trying to juggle between cooking dinner and trying to make the kids behave. I walked into the kitchen while she was cooking. She was so focused that she didn't even notice me. I snuck behind her and wrapped my arms around her. "Olivia," I said, with a flirtatious voice. "Jake." She responded with a sigh of relief. "How did the donation go?" she said. "It went well," I responded vaguely. The look in Olivia's eyes told me I had to say more. The doctor was really impressed by my blood purity. "That's wonderful," she said. "You know, I still haven't seen your blood purity," I said with a curious tone. Yeah, I know," Olivia said with a slightly annoyed tone. "I was a huge bully back in high school, so I'm a little ashamed of my blood purity." Olivia got back to cutting vegetables. I decided to drop the subject knowing it was really sensitive for her. But before I could say any more, there was a loud crash sound. I looked over to see my children had knocked over an expensive vase, and it shattered. But as I turned towards the commotion, I suddenly heard another loud sound, a high-pitched cry. The sudden commotion startled Olivia, and the tip of her middle finger had slipped right where the knife was cutting. I quickly grabbed a towel to help, but I saw a horrible sight, one that made me jump back in fear. Olivia's blood was pitch black, having absolutely no reflection, no glimpse of light, just pure darkness. Anything it touched looked like it disappeared. I stood there, staring in shock. The killer in France who had murdered 8 people didn't even have blood that dark. What the fuck did she do? I felt like I was in some sort of hypnosis, but I was suddenly snapped out of it with a sudden flash of light. A bit of blood had fallen off of the knife, revealing its shiny silver. I suddenly grabbed my kids and ran to the car. I didn't have time to explain the situation before running off. As I drove away, I could hear screams of despair and anguish coming from the house, from Olivia. My kids screamed in fear, not knowing what was going on. Did they even see Olivia's blood? No, I don't think they had any idea. After what felt like an eternity of driving, I stopped. I broke down crying. What should I do? I can't go back there with that sociopath. But can I really abandon everything I had? What will I tell my kids? My parents? What about the police? She has clearly done something horrible and unforgivable, but I don't know what. Shit. I'm muttering to myself. What do I do? What can I do? Am I truly helpless? Story, Tongues, a horror story. It was already 2 years ago. I still remember that ghastly night. I was arriving home in my car. I went to park it and I saw a person sitting on the bench of my parents' house front yard. I went there and talked to him. Asked who he was. He just contemplated me with the most horrifying stare for what felt like a solid minute. I was in shock. I saw he had a hand in his pocket and his menacingly gaze made me realize I could get hurt if I stayed there. I went home, got to my room and looked at him through the blinds in my window. He wouldn't move. I was thinking of calling the police, but I didn't want to wake up my parents. I became paranoid at this point and couldn't go to sleep, had the need to be looking through the blinds at this mysterious character. It was already 3 a.m. and the man didn't move an inch. I just noticed that he moved once to smoke a cigarette. I was getting very tired and eventually blacked out. I woke up to a loud slam, like one of the doors was closed violently. I immediately got up and went to my window. To my surprise, the man wasn't there anymore. This made me freak out. I grabbed my flashlight and went searching room by room, from my bedroom to the living room, next the bathroom, the kitchen, the basement. When I got to the basement, after I went down the stairs, the door behind me was slammed shut. I got startled and ran up the stairs, tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. I banged at the door in the expectation of my parents listening and coming down from their room to help me get out of the basement. This was to no avail. I sat on the floor and waited for someone to help me get out of there. 4 a.m., I woke up, had blacked out once again. Went to the door again to bang it to make someone come help me. I tried to turn the knob and miraculously the door opened. I was so relieved, I wondered how and why the door got locked in the first place. Went to check my parents' room to see if they were okay since they didn't hear my loud banging. I entered their room When I saw the mess that was my parents' room, I almost vomited, dropped to my knees and got paralyzed. They were both dead, in the walls was written with their blood, "Now they won't be talking anymore." I approached them and noticed their tongues were missing and their cheeks were cut ear to ear, like a big smile. I called the cops to come to my parents' house as soon as possible since there had been a dual homicide. The cops were suspecting it was me who did the act, but I assured them I was locked by an unknown cause in the basement. They made a team come get my parents' corpses. They were in shock since they had never seen someone do to their faces what this maniac did. I didn't know at the time that this man was the one responsible for locking me in the basement and then murdering both of my parents. How did I come to discover it? Well, the work the police were doing was taking a lot of time. I was feeling desperate to find the one responsible for that atrocity. I am a big fan of cosplaying, yet I don't cosplay myself. I like to see others doing it, also dressing up with original masks and costumes. There was a convention in my town, one about costumes and that kind of stuff. This year I made a mask just to get in the spirit the day of the convention. At the event I saw many awesome masks and costumes, but one caught my eye. It was one that had a mask made of leather, had some spikes on top, and had below each eye a tongue, two very realistic tongues. I followed that guy around the convention. There was something bugging me about this fellow. When he went out of the building where the event was taking place to smoke a cigarette, he took off his mask. I got shocked. It was the same man that was sitting in the bench of my parents' house front yard. I started connecting the pieces and it all started to make sense. Only thing that was bugging me now is that I can't accuse this man just because of this coincidence. He noticed I was looking at him and approached me. He said, "Do I know you?" I said maybe. We started chatting. Eventually he gave me his phone number before we left the event. He was a kind person. I don't see why I feared him before. Yet the idea that he might have to do with the death of my parents is still bugging me. We hang out for some days until he starts acting a bit weird. He invites me more than usual to go to his house and have dinner or lunch with him. He makes excellent food, so I don't refuse his invites. Funny thing about his food is that it tastes and smells a bit like almonds always. I kind of enjoyed it. I didn't know I was falling into a trap. One day I feel that is very hard to breathe, like I breathed in the air, but it felt like I wasn't getting any oxygen out of it. I instantly phoned emergency services and explained how I was feeling. They sent right away an ambulance to my house. When they got there I was seizing on the floor. I went to the hospital and they administered medication to stop the seizures and make me be able to breathe again. They ran some blood tests and as it turns out I was secretly being poisoned. It finally made sense. I told the police that that man was slowly poisoning me. The police interrogated him and as it turns out both the already running investigation to find my parents' murder and now the investigation to find out who poisoned me traced all back to that man. The police also found the mask he took the event, ran some tests on the tongues of the mask and found out that the DNA of those tongues are both from my mother and my father. He was arrested and sent to jail. I don't know how much time he's going to spend there. I just hope that if he comes out, he never hurts anyone ever again. I'm still traumatized to this day by what happened and what I saw. Story: Two Little Girls. Springfield, Ohio, August of 1992. I was an 8-year-old that particular summer. My parents only recently started letting me go outside by myself and I was taking full advantage, but I had rules to follow, or my rights would be immediately revoked. For one, I couldn't leave my family's property. We kids had a large backyard with 2 outdoor playsets with slides and swings, so entertainment wasn't an issue, even if I had to keep it contained to the yard. Mom said it was for our own protection. She said that strangers can't be trusted, so we had to stay in the backyard, and never play in front or by the side of the road where we could easily be snatched. I didn't always obey this, but I never got caught either. This changed quickly one wet, balmy summer afternoon when my mom got word that 2 little girls about my age were missing. They had last been seen at the bakery just down the street from our house while buying sweets, their bikes discarded by the side of the road as if the girls were snatched. Or so that's what my mother told me. After a search, the girls, Free Morrow and Martha Leach, aged 11 and 12, were found dead in a gruesome, horrible fashion. I won't go into it here because the awful things they did to those girls isn't the point of this story. However, the shit I'm not talking about here is easily found online with just a quick search. Just know though, that the details are fucked up and it's not for the faint of heart. The parents of Springfield changed that day. All of my newly given freedoms were revoked. After all, the killer, or killers, were still at large. For all my mom knew, it could have been one of our neighbors. She didn't trust anyone anymore. I didn't understand it at the time, but as a parent now, I fully get it. If I were my mom, I would have locked my children down, as well. What else could she have done? There were so few options available. Who else was going to protect us if not our own parents? Everyone else was too busy trying to figure out who the murderer was. I frankly didn't care at the time who killed them. I only cared that they were dead and not coming back. I didn't know Martha very well, but I was pretty familiar with Free. The girls were a bit older than me, and we didn't share any classes, but I knew Free most through a summer gym program we both attended a month or so earlier. My brain couldn't wrap around it. I kept hearing about the horrible details of their deaths, of the terrible state that the killers left them in, of facts I wasn't mentally prepared for, but had to hear anyway. The news left few details out in those days, and what I didn't fully understand at the beginning of a school day, I was well educated in the schoolyard by the time I got home in the afternoon. 8-year-olds have no business hearing about the cruel ways their playmates' corpses were desecrated, but there I was. I heard the funeral was a real shit show, but I obviously wasn't there for that. My mom had a thing about me and funerals. She didn't think I was ready to go to any until I was well into my teens, and even then, was overprotective in the extreme when I finally went to my first one with her. I thought she was being extra back then, and I was mostly right, but now as an adult, I really do see where she was coming from a lot more than I used to. That said, to be honest, I think going to the funerals might have actually also been beneficial for me, all things considered. I've never been able to fully process their deaths, so maybe being able to say goodbye would have helped, but I have no way of knowing for sure. What I do know was that my mom was sure that she made the right decision when she heard that there were fights and family feuding allegedly taking place during the viewing and burial, but of course, I have no way of knowing if that's true or rumor. Small towns are sadly like that. Folks who weren't even there will claim anything they can to make themselves look more interesting. Meanwhile, some of us truly wish they could have attended, if anything, just for the closure. I didn't even get closure when they caught the killers. I'm not going to name them here, nor give them attention. They don't deserve it. All you need to know is there was a group of middle-aged to old men led by one of their gang of peers. The bastards tried to molest the girls, and when they fought back, they didn't just hurt the girls. They brutalized and destroyed them. There was no excuse for the monstrousness of killing anyone, let alone 2 little girls. There was nothing they could have done to deserve that. I didn't care about the reasons given for the murders. I didn't care what the murderers had to say at the trial. Their confessions meant less than nothing to me. All I cared about was that my friends were dead, and knowing the horrible details weren't going to bring them back. Frankly, hearing the killer's excuses was an exercise in self-harm. One that I refused to subject myself to again. Though I did try to read a book on the murders once, but I never got to finish it. There's actually a really crazy and ironic reason why, too. Fast forward to Christmas of 2005. I was a new mother to a sweet little baby girl and times were hard. Homelessness was new to me, but I wasn't wearing it well. A local church was offering a free turkey feast and gifts for children at a holiday party, and my friend had invited my daughter, now son, and I to attend as well, despite not being members of the church. Of course, I jumped at the chance, and we all went together, her and her kids, and me and mine. It was lovely at first. My kid got to sit on Santa's lap and received a cute teddy bear and some candy. Then we had the feast, but I ended up realizing my allergen was in every dish, so I pulled out a book to read while I waited for my family to finish eating. I was reading a book written about the murders, which also happened to be in the town it happened in. To be fair, I should have known better, but how was I to guess that I would be sitting at the table of someone directly related to the case? Springfield is a small town, but I never guessed that small. As I was reading, I noticed a guy staring at me. Then my friend told me to put the book away and wouldn't tell me why, but I did as I was told. I still didn't know why she was acting that way while we were leaving after the party and was alone for a moment in the parking lot having a cigarette before we left when a middle-aged man walked up to me. I said hello, and he responded with, "I bet you want to know what I know about those girls, don't you?" This threw me through a loop. I was like, WTF? Before I could really speak to him, though, my friend grabbed me and my kid and dragged us back to her car, telling us to get in as quickly as possible. Only when we were pulling out did I finally realize exactly what had happened back there. Mrs. J, my friend and driver, told me that was the brother of the head of that killer gang of middle-aged to old men. She asked me what he was saying to me, and when I told her, her face turned white with fear. Needless to say, I wasn't invited back to that church. I never finished the book. It felt weird after that particular encounter. Years passed, and I had almost forgotten about this event. That is until I was at the city library one afternoon before closing time and was gathering my things to leave. I saw the brother of the head murderer and immediately recognized him. There was no mistaking this man. He had a look about him that was hard to forget. Still, I was convinced that he'd never remember me. Not in a million years. That is, until the guy ran up to me, his face glowing with recollection. It was clear he knew exactly who I was and that he wanted to continue with the conversation we were having years before. He looked excited to see me. After a quick greeting, I told him that I had to get going, but he followed me out the door and all the way to the bus stop. I waited there for the bus, listening to his constant reassurance that he didn't know anything and was passed for being a suspect on account of his innocence. It was, quite frankly, a redneck murder version of Forrest Gump as this strange man blathered on and on about his life, his brother, and how the crime affected his life on that random bus stop bench. The whole exchange was strange in the extreme, but I was patient and polite throughout. Not only to be respectful of another human being, but also, I didn't know this guy. I had no reason to believe I was safe. After all, his brother was literally the most notorious murderer in the entire city. And then it hit me. There would be no way I could get off at my usual stop, because then he'd know where I lived at the time. I didn't know what to do, but I felt extremely uncomfortable. This man would not stop talking. I don't even remember all of what was said years later, but I just know I was unnerved and desperately wanted the social exchange to end as soon as possible. To my horror, it didn't. He followed me to the bus stop where I was to make my transfer to get home. However, when I said my goodbyes as I got on, he got on as well and said he was heading my way. When asked where that would be, he couldn't give me an answer. This is when I was forthcoming with him and said he was making me uncomfortable. I politely and softly explained that I didn't want to talk anymore and would like some quiet time now. Then, I got off a few blocks before my usual stop and instead of heading home, I walked to the fire station on that route and rang the doorbell. When I turned around to see where he went, the strange man was all the way across the other side of the street as if to avoid me. The fire department was kind and had someone escort me home safely. Never saw him again. Bye and see you again in the next videos and stories.